Mike in Powder Springs, Georgia. Hey, Mike, what's up?
How you doing, Tom?
Good. What's up?
Hey, I just want to basically kind of throw some point of view from the other side here. And I'm actually kind of stunned at the discourse I just heard there. Let's start with what we can agree on, and that's probably with Trump. I think he is a thin-skinned bloviator.
Okay.
That's what he does. That's what...
Mike, I'm having a hard time hearing you. If you've got me on a speakerphone, is there any chance you can turn it off?
There's a highly
Thank you.
Good chance of that. How's that?
A highly what?
There's a very good chance of that. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you much better.
Okay. The problem that the left's got is, and don't take this the wrong way, I'm just going to tell it like it is, and this is from firsthand observation. First, let me premise with the fact that I worked with the State Department and I lived in the Middle East. Now, I don't mean that I stayed on American base. I lived there. I bought groceries in parts of the world.
Mm-hmm.
You guys have a very naive perspective on foreign policy. It's nauseating sometimes because you sit back and you watch programs get instilled, and you know what's going to happen with the outcome before it.
So let's back out of the broad brush stuff here, and Mike, and tell me specifically what are you talking about?
Okay, sure. Let's look at the Syria policy. The fact that you would believe, and that the Obama administration was believing that the Syrians would give up their chemical weapons program and that our great friends the Russians would in fact help supervise that. That's simply, it's kind of like Saddam.
Well, the State Department that you said you worked for certified that that was the case.
I'm sorry?
The State Department certified that that was the case.
That wasn't my part of the State Department. I can tell you flat out. I watched that and said, you cannot be this naive. That part of the world, they don't see the world as we see it. And that's the problem that the left makes, is that you want to have the beliefs that we have in the United States, that they are consistent the world over. And that's simply not true.
No, it's very much not the case.
It's bad. That doesn't mean it's wrong. That doesn't mean that, these people are bad people. It's just their culture and our culture are vastly different.
No disagreement, Mike.
Vastly different.
No disagreement. And I've spent a lot of time in the Middle East myself. No disagreement.
Okay. And so when you have someone come in and say, hey, look, we want you to do something that is in their inherent disinterest strategically for them within that region as far as a position of strength, they're not going to do it. And look at Saddam Hussein, for example. Whether or not he had chemical weapons doesn't matter. The fact that he went around and told the world that he did was a way for him to keep his position in power and to keep his regional...
Well, now we're getting into the twilight zone, Mike. Saddam Hussein was loudly asserting he had no chemical weapons for years.
No.
Yes.
I was there.
Yes. Baghdad Bob was on TV every night. We got no chemical weapons. You had Hans Blix saying that. You had Scott Ritter saying that. You had the entire United Nations saying that. You had Germany saying that. You had France saying that. I mean, everybody except...
You're not hearing me. I was there. And what I'm telling you is that to his security apparatus and to his regional enemies, he was saying that he did. That's how he kept his stronghold in power and why no one actually went after him.
Yeah, prior to 9/11. Yeah.
Okay.
Sure, he let people believe that. Sure, prior to 9/11. But, again, how does that represent... why should we spend $1 trillion and sacrifice the lives of 5,000 Americans, not to mention half a million dead Iraqis, for whether or not Saddam Hussein had or didn't have weapons of mass destruction?
We're past the UN war, we're not, or that original war, we're not going to get anywhere. First of all, it's simple. It was a UN resolution. We had several that we should have enforced. Secondly, how we propagate warfare now in this current time frame is wrong. You win a war by getting your enemy or destroying your enemy's ability to make war and also want to make war. We haven't done that since World War II. You're never going to find a single military guy that's going to tell you that, hey, war is great. We're not. We're going to sit and tell you, hey, it is the most god-awful thing that you can ever do. But if you are going to do it, you have to go after it and prosecute it in the most violent way that you possibly can.
I do not disagree. I mean, you're talking Churchill and Roosevelt here. And we
haven't been doing that.
But what's been happening, Mike, is starting with Maggie Thatcher and the Falklands and seeing a 30% rise in her popularity, which was underwater at the time, as a consequence of the Falklands. Then you get Ronald Reagan saying, okay, I got to have a little war. Where can we invade? Oh, Grenada. Let's do Grenada. And then George Herbert Walker Bush comes along and sends through April Gillespie this phony signal to Saddam Hussein about, oh, yeah, you can take Kuwait back. It used to be it used to be the 37th state of Iraq. And then as soon as he does, it's like we get the ambassador's daughter lying to Congress about, kids in incubators. And that becomes, the justification for George Herbert Walker Bush's short war in Iraq. Then you get George W. Bush telling Mickey Herskowitz, his biographer, who ghost wrote A Charge to Keep, his autobiography, on tape in 1999. When my father went into Iraq, he made a terrible political decision, which was to keep the war too short. If I become president, I'm going to invade Iraq. And I'm not going to have a short war. I'm going to have a successful war, and that war is going to give me the political capital to privatize Social Security. He said it right up front, and it is no secret. So we've had a succession of presidents, and this is setting aside the debates about Clinton's motives with regard to, the former Yugoslavia, excuse me, which is just wildly debatable. But what you have is at least a series of Republican presidents who have started wars for political purposes. And that produces, number one, you're right. It's not, when you take on somebody bigger than Grenada, it takes more than just a little bit of effort to bring that country to its knees, if that's the goal of the war. And number two, after World War II, yes, we utterly destroyed Germany. But we also participated aggressively in rebuilding Germany. And we're doing neither. I mean, our foreign policy, or at least the foreign policy that's been promoted by neoconservative, by and large, Republicans, has been crazy, in my opinion.
You mentioned earlier some Twilight Zone about some of the points where I was making. There's some of the things you mentioned there. I don't know where you get that from.
What?
Can you hear me?
I can, Mike.
Okay. I don't disagree with some of the going into places and planting the American flag and said that everybody wants to be a capitalist and embrace Jeffersonian-style democracy. That's absurd.
Right.
I agree with you wholeheartedly on that one. We have to deal with what's actually happening right now. It's one of the biggest issues that I have with the Libertarian Party. They're the same kind of folks that'll tell you that your house is burning down, and instead of solving the problem that's in your face right now to deal with it, they're going to talk to you about the evils of corporatists who make flammable materials and that they're taxing you and so that they can provide for a fire department. Oh, by the way, the fire department lit the match to start the fire. That's the craziness that we're dealing with people now. We have a problem. We have a fire burning in the Middle East. We have to solve it.
I agree.
We either stand by and watch it or try and talk people into it, or we go in and we choose a side.
And we have to recognize that we played a role in that fire. We supported Saudi Arabia's exporting Wahhabism for almost 100 years. We have not been intervening, in my opinion, appropriately in the Palestinian-Israeli situation. So you've got basically an apartheid state, not unlike South Africa in many ways, and that is festering in that region. And then George W. Bush, for political purposes, so he could privatize Social Security, started a war in Iraq that Dick Cheney, walked the intelligence down to Langley and lied us into. We've got to acknowledge the damage that we've done in that region. And then on top of that, you got climate change. You got, 1 million Syrian farmers whose farms turned to sand, who ended up in Damascus and Aleppo and, destabilized the country. Mike, we're out of time here. We'll have this conversation another time.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archives.
Or let me say that better. We'll continue this conversation another time. I appreciate somebody who disagrees with me who's willing to engage in conversation. Thank you, Mike. David in Salem, South Carolina. Hey, David, what's on your mind?
Yeah, hi. I just couldn't resist. That guy was so full of it. I've lived and worked in the Middle East. I've been an Arabic speaker for over 30 years. I lived and worked in Israel, the West Bank. I lived with Bedouins. I was just last year in Lebanon, And I don't know where this guy's. I mean, what you're saying is absolutely true. And just last year, I mean, I saw where the camps were. I spoke with Syrians. I speak more of the Levantine. And, you know, it's just amazing what's going on. And we are the reason of it. I mean, if this guy truly worked for the, you know, State Department, the, God, I don't know why I can't remember the guy's first name, Ford, the ambassador that we had over there. I mean, he's really pretty well respected. And, you know, he speaks fluent Arabic. And, I mean, you know, anybody who really knows what's going on is kind of sidelined. But, I mean, look at the pipeline of the weapons that were given there to the so-called Free Syrian Army and that. I mean, you know, it's like Assad might be a bad guy. I mean, yeah, well, he is. But, you know, we are talking about the Middle East, and there are a lot of other communities.
Well, the other thing that I find interesting, David, and I'd love to get your take on this, is that if Assad goes down, then basically the big three secular nationalists, which was Saddam Hussein, Muammar Gaddafi, and Bashar al-Assad, will have gone down, and every country in the region will now be run by a theocracy rather than a secular government. Who does that benefit?
Well, no, I mean, and it's, you know, the Likud party is really pushing this. They think that, you know, they can get rid of these people and it would be better. It's almost like how South Africa was. I mean, I'm 65, so it's almost like how South Africa was with people like Idi Amin and you know, weak states around them, which was not a good idea.
And Rhodesia.
Yeah, and you know, and you look at Israel pushing this because, you know, the people who are running the train are the settlers. And they think that this can, you know, would be better. Oh, yeah, let's get rid of Assad. Let's get rid of Saddam. And I think that they're actually beginning to wonder about, well, you know, I mean, Assad can keep these people under control. I mean, you know, that they were actually close to a peace deal with him, but it was the very right wing of the Likud, which I'm repeating myself. But, I mean, you know, they did not want to give up the heights, and you know, it's just kind of strange what's going on over there. And I mean, you know, Israel was very different when I worked there. It's you know, very Russianized with, you know, like Stalinist speech, like not one step backwards and this kind of stuff. But I think that people are beginning to wonder about, you know, what are you going to do about warlords? It's going to be like Afghanistan.
Yep.
And you know, they figure there's 1,700 different militias in Syria. You know?
Wow.
And it's like, you know, because it's now just, you know, criminal gangs and, you know, they do have a
and tribal
real
loyalties.
problem in the, I'm sorry?
And tribal loyalties, regional tribal loyalties.
Yeah, and actually I did write, you know, I have advanced degrees in anthropology and American history, but in 1982 I wrote a thesis about that, and I was in Vietnam, and I studied that, and I just happened to point to the Middle East weirdly about how the tribalism in the Middle East would reflect.
David, we're out of time, but you know, please call again. Let's continue this conversation.